Here we go. Welcome to Bible Study Hub, Monday night edition. I'm Anne, and this is my beautiful daughter, Noelle, who came racing in from work tonight to be with us. Even though I said to her, it's okay, you don't have to. She said, no, I'm not going to miss this. So we're so glad.
I'm not missing it. We're so excited to be here. Daniel chapter 8 is where we start tonight, right?
Yes. Okay. So we have some catch up to do here because I know that we have some new people. By the way, if you're new, please say hello to us. We want to get to know you. We're so glad that you're here. And we know that we have new people joining us every week. So if you haven't been with us, or if you have been, but you just forgot everything, we're in the middle of the book of Daniel. And the first 6 chapters were kind of like the historical narrative stuff. Lots of awesome, true stories that just kind of make your mind blow up. Then the next 6 chapters, 7 through 12, are going to be much more prophecy. So last week we had a lot of prophecy. We had some in chapter 2. We're going to take some of the prophecy and bring it down to even more specificity tonight. And so what we're going to do is actually kind of go in bigger chunks tonight. We're going to just summarize some of it. We're not going to read every single verse tonight. But what we want you to know, a couple little reminders. One is just about general Bible prophecy. Noelle, do you want to just kind of remind us like how short-term, midterm, and long-term fulfillment works?
Yeah, so I mean, it sort of is what it sounds like. So short-term fulfillment of prophecy is it happens generally like within somebody's lifetime or within a generation. And then you've got these mid-range fulfillments where they are, again, pretty short term, again, within a generation, maybe a couple generations removed, but well within the time period. And then you've got these very, very long fulfillments. So think about all the prophecies about Jesus Christ. I mean, those were some of them thousands of years of time passing. Mm-hmm. And to this day, there are prophecies that have not been fulfilled yet. Those are the very long-term prophecies. And if you're like me, you say to yourself, well, that's a clever and convenient cop-out. So prophecy doesn't come to pass and you're like, oh no, it's just a long-term fulfillment. It just hasn't happened yet. It's like, great. Well, that's really convenient for you, isn't it? That all of your prophecies. But what the Bible does such a nice job of is that it gives us these prophecies that are going to have both short or midterm and long-term fulfillment. And so basically what it does is it has this internal verification of the prophecy of saying, there's 2 fulfillments of the prophecy. One is going to happen relatively soon within a lifetime, within a generation. And that's going to validate that you can be confident in the long-term fulfillment of this prophecy, that this is going to come later. And we're going to be talking about something called types. I know, it's like a really technical term. We're going to talk about that tonight because this is one of the ways that God actually helps draw conclusions and sort of draw together these short-term and the long-term coming fulfillment. So what we're talking about tonight, a lot of it has not happened yet. And we hope that it does not happen in my lifetime. I don't want to be here for this, but there were short-term fulfillments sort of to give us the validation that this is real. It's not just a cop-out that, oh, it'll happen someday. Validate that it does happen. We've got the short-term, and then we'll talk about the long-term. Anything else you wanted to say about that?
Yeah, let me just say something kind of alongside that. And that is, last week we introduced this concept that the Bible often has this repeat and expand paradigm that it puts the prophecies through. So God doesn't always just give one prophecy one time. Very often he will repeat a prophecy over and over again. But as it gets repeated, he will expand on either the whole thing, or sometimes he'll just pick out like 1 or 2 elements and really almost zero in like microscope on those elements and expand those. So as we go tonight, actually, I want to go over to a few pictures because pictures are truly worth 1,000 words.
Pictures. Let me see pictures. I'm ready.
All right. So I had to do this in 2 parts because it's actually like portrait mode, but this is landscape. It's the only way I can do it. So I cut the picture in half. So anyway, bear with me. I'm going to give you the bottom half here in just a moment.
Look at the technical prowess.
I know. Back in chapter 2, we had Daniel's vision of a statue. Actually, it was Nebuchadnezzar's vision of a statue that Daniel interpreted. And then last week in Daniel 7, we said that statue kind of got transformed into the same prophecies, but now in the form of beasts. And tonight, we're going to get a lot of the same prophecy, but honed in on part of the statue, a couple of the beasts, and it's going to be brand new animals. So looking at that picture, we've got the head of gold. You remember back in chapter 2, that was King Nebuchadnezzar and the kingdom of Babylon. Then we said last week that that corresponded with Daniel's vision of that winged lion. Do y'all remember that? Then it went on. That's right. In the statue, the arms of silver, we said last week, corresponded in chapter 7 to that big lumbering lopsided bear. And we said that was the Medo Persian Empire that took over. Go all the way to the right there, because you'll see tonight that corresponds with a ram. And that's not the greatest picture of the ram, because the ram should have one horn that's longer than the other, but we'll get to that tonight. Now let me go to the bottom of the statue here. There we go.
Oh.
All right. So we've got the abdomen basically and thighs of bronze in the statue. That's top left corner. That corresponded with the winged leopard with the 4 heads, the 4 wings. And we said last week that was the Greek Empire led by Alexander the Great. Now look all the way to the right, because tonight that's going to correspond with a billy goat who technically is a unicorn. He has 1 horn on his head. So when we get to that, you're going to know, oh, that's the winged leopard, and that's the thighs and abdomen of bronze. And then the rest you'll see on the far right. We don't have anything about the legs of iron tonight. We don't have anything about the mixture of the feet of iron and clay that corresponded with that beast, although we are going to get just a little bit of kind of long-term prophecy going on in there. So hopefully that little chart helps.
I have to just chime in and just stop for a moment, because if I'm coming in and I haven't been with this, even if I have been with this for all this time, I just listen to what you just said and I look at that image. I'm like, this is the most convoluted, complex world building. It sounds like we're doing a podcast on like really dissecting J.R. Tolkien or something, some fantasy novel. And you're like, this is the most convoluted storyline. Like, who came up with this? It almost feels like manufactured. Like, this just... What are we doing? Like, what is the point of all this detail? Can you not just pick one metaphor, stick with the metaphor? Why do we need to repeat it 17 times with these different... It feels really like a lot. Maybe give a thumbs up if you're with me, because that's how it feels to be. Like, genuinely, I look at this and I'm just like, I feel like I'm in one of those, YouTube channels where they dive really deep into some like fantasy fiction thing. And you're like, oh my gosh, who cares about this stuff? But obviously it's the Bible. And so because of our worldview, we come in and go, we know this matters. God told us this. Susie says, thank you. Yes. Thank you. I'm glad I'm not the only one. You make me feel better. Because Mom, you don't feel that way, I bet. I bet you're just like, what? No, it feels, but that's always the way I look at this. So I'm just like, what on earth is this? This is ridiculous. So why go through all this imagery? And like, we got unicorns in the Bible now. Seriously, if we just title this one, unicorns in the Bible, like, we'll get views. We can rack up views on YouTube.
But you're not going to do that.
But seriously, it sounds so absurd and outrageous.
Right. Well, what it basically is what we just said a minute ago, is that God repeats prophecy for us, and then he will take something and he will expand on it for whatever his purpose is, that he chooses to use different pictures and metaphors and things like that to help us understand. It's what he just wants to do. So what we want to do is just make sure that we don't leave anybody behind. I take it that Noelle was not impressed with my chart.
No, I'm super impressed with it. Sorry.
I was like, I'm going to go.
No, that's not me being degrading in any way. But what I think it actually demonstrates is just how, candidly, outrageous and bizarre all of this is. And so it's like, this is in the Bible, so it has to mean something. And at least in my mind, I go, pick a metaphor, stick with it. And then I have to ask, okay, well, clearly God is a much better narrator than I am. So if he chose to use 3 distinct, extremely detailed, complex metaphors with their own independent storylines, there has to be some reason for that. I'll just pose one reason that he might choose to do this, and I think this might be the most likely, and also gives a nice answer to why I don't understand what's going on, is that when we get to that time where these things are being fulfilled in the long-term prophecy, so that's, this is called apocalyptic prophecy, end of days, there is intrinsic detail sort of embedded in each of these images that will have more meaning and give better instructions to people who are in that time that just isn't revealed to us right now. It's just not obvious because we don't have the context. So when I look at it, I go, okay, I think there's actually, I theorize, there's either some pragmatic or logistical reason that God chose to do it this way, so that when those people come back and they're, searching through the book and their knowledge is expanding, that's what Daniel says is going to happen in the end times. They're going to be, going back and forth in this book, trying to figure it out. Knowledge is expanding. I think they'll have actually an expanded view of what these individual metaphors mean that's going to be instructive in some way. Whereas right now, it just looks like, let's add in some additional and unnecessary and arbitrary complexity. Like, why couldn't you have just explained it? I think it's actually this thing of data information is embedded within it that it will be valuable at a later point.
Probably true.
So,
probably true.
Not trying to diss on your image. I thought it was wonderful. It's just I had to voice that because I struggle in these moments. I'm like, this is not a fantasy podcast.
Not at all. Not at all. This is all real. All right. Well, let me do this. Let me sum up verses 1 to 14. I would encourage you all to go back on your own and read all of those, but we didn't want to lose everybody tonight by getting too in the weeds. So I'm just going to kind of take those verses and kind of tell you what they're all about. And I'm going to show you some pictures because I think it helps. We got a lot of pictures
We'll see
tonight.
if I just really rip on the next picture, right?
Yeah, I know. Now I'm all like nervous about it. I'm just kidding. I'll just write you out of my will. Okay, so Daniel is transported in a vision to a city called Susa, where he sees himself like in the vision as a third-party bystander. So here's a little map, and I don't really know how clear this map is, but we have Babylon, we have Susa. Susa is actually in the modern day country of Iraq. Iran.
No, Iran.
Iran, Iran. So sorry about that. So anyway, it's about 225 miles from Babylon to Susa. He didn't actually travel there. He was kind of transported in a vision. And it says that he's standing by a canal. And so I thought it was interesting. I found a picture where that Ulai mentioned, that's the name of it, in Daniel 8, where the Ulai Canal is. So there's it's not there anymore, but you can see kind of that's where Daniel was. Isn't that crazy to think that that's what he was seeing? I think that's so amazing. Cool. I know. So anyway, Daniel sees a ram standing on the bank of that canal in his vision. But there's something really interesting about that ram. It's got 2 horns, which is normal, but one of them is longer than the other. And it says that this ram charges in every direction except for east, and no one can withstand it, and it's overpowering everyone. So you can imagine Daniel having this vision where a ram looks like this with 1 horn long, and it's going crazy, but there's one direction it doesn't go. So the question is, okay, who's the ram? What does that represent? Well, down in verse 20, which we'll get to in just a minute, let me just read it. It says, the angel Gabriel interprets for us. It says, as for the ram that you saw with the 2 horns, those are the kings of Media and Persia. And that's what we said earlier tonight when we were kind of looking at the little chart. That was the Medo Persian Empire. So one horn was larger than the other. Noelle, tell us what the significance of one longer horn, one shorter horn.
Yeah, yes. Persia was bigger and stronger than Media. So presumably the long horn is Persia.
Exactly. Okay, good. So then the next thing that Daniel sees in his vision is it's a billy goat. That would be the one on the right. But it's weird because it only has 1 horn, just 1. And it comes from the west, but it's so swift and powerful, its feet don't even touch the ground. Like it just goes soaring over the landscape. Well, you remember last week, it was the leopard with the wings. And we said leopards are some of the fastest animals. And if you add wings to them, they would be super, super, super fast. And then it says that the horn, like the unicorn horn, breaks off after it's utterly decimated the poor ram. I did feel a little sorry for the ram, I have to admit. Yeah, so the billy goat gets his horn broken off. And then in its place, 4 horns.
Oh, goodness.
Grow up. Okay.
So your pictures tonight are just extraordinary. My word.
Thank you. I hope they're helpful because I know this is really hard, and I appreciate everybody who's hanging in here with us. It does get easier, I promise. So anyway, that's just a little depiction of this now four horn. Used to be a unicorn. Now it's got four horns. You know, neither is normal. And again, the angel Gabriel tells us what this means. So let me read to you verses 21 to 22. It says, and the goat, that's this, is the king of Greece. That would be Alexander the Great, by the way. And the great horn between his eyes is the first king, Alexander the Great. As for the horn that was broken, in place of which four others arose, four kingdoms shall arise from his nation, but not with his power. Now, this is really fascinating because what happened was shortly after Alexander the Great's death in 33 BC,
I think 323 BC.
323, he was 33 years old. Sorry. Yeah. Four of his generals succeeded him. And it was a long, like 25-year saga until these guys actually nailed it down. Looked like there was going to be five. Turns out there were four. So this is kind of a mid-range prophecy, but they were never as powerful as Alexander the Great's kingdom had been. So Noelle, I'm going to stop talking for a minute. Give us the quick recap of everything I just said.
We've
Do a
got
better job.
We've got a lot of animals going on. Yeah, so this is prophesying something that has not yet happened when Daniel's hearing this. So you've got Medo Persian Empire prophesied, and then you've got the Greek Empire prophesied, and then some very specific information about how Alexander the Great, obviously not named here, but would be overtaken by these four generals. So that's really interesting. That whole east and west thing, though, is kind of intriguing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it just is perfect with the directions that these various empires went. Whatever the Bible said the ram or the goat was doing, that's exactly the direction that the empires came along and did, which is really incredible when you think about it. Let's read verses 9 to 10 now, because now we're going to be talking, again, we're kind of like going in on a little bit more detail on these horns. So, Noelle, why don't you read verses 9 to 10 for us?
Yeah. Out of one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land. It grew great even to the host of heaven, and some of the hosts and some of the stars it threw down to the ground and trampled them. So we've got more directionality in this, southeast, toward the glorious land. That refers to Israel, right? Glorious
That's
land.
correct. Yes. And
Right.
it says it grows all the way to the sky. And then it throws down some of the host of heaven. I know that's a question. We're going to get to that in a few minutes. So just hang on to that one for the moment. But when I first read this, my first thought was, oh, this has to be talking about the Antichrist, right? It sounds like the end times Antichrist. However, there's just a few problems with that. First of all, we haven't read it yet, but coming up in a second, in verse 14, it says 2,300 days are mentioned as a time between when the temple has that desolation moment and then when the sacrifices are reinstated. 2,300 days is about 6 years and 20 days. And last week we talked about how the second half of the tribulation was 3.5 years, not 6 years. So that's kind of a problem. And then it says after those 2,300 days, it doesn't say that the Messiah comes. It just says that the sacrifices are reinstituted. Right. Yeah. So that's a little bit of a different ending too. So it can't be the Antichrist. It has to be somebody else. So Noelle, who is it?
Well, how do we say this guy's name? Is it
Antiochus? It's Antiochus Epiphanes. And there he is. There's a real picture of him.
There he is. That's him. Yeah. That's his mummified face right there.
No, it's not actually, guys.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, it's not. Here's what I love about this guy. He gave himself this name. This man, just, classic narcissist. His name means God manifest. It's like, ooh, God manifest. Isn't that impressive? And everybody else nicknamed him Antiochus Epiphanes, which means madman, which I love. Is they're like, we'll just change one letter of this guy who's given himself this. I've had people who give themselves nicknames, then everyone's like, oh, we'll take that. Like we can make that a really fun nickname. And I feel like that's what happened here. But he's the guy who basically took over Egypt, 170 BC? Yeah. Am I right of this? And then attacked Jerusalem several years later. And I mean, just as we've done this before, like these guys are just brutal, but this one was particularly horrific and sold like 40,000 Jews into slavery,
And
executed about the
slaughtered.
same number.
Yeah. Yep.
And then obviously the Jews were furious, they rebelled, and it goes generally poorly. And just, I mean, he outlaws Judaism, he does all of these horrible things, sacrificing a pig on their altar. If you know
Let's just talk
anything,
about that. Yeah, I was just saying, let's talk about that, because to us Gentiles, we're like, ooh, gross. It was way beyond ooh, gross for them, right, Noelle?
I mean, pig is like the dirtiest animal that they
So
could.
unclean for them.
Yeah, it is the picture of unclean animals and just horrible. And so he just, yeah, it's a desolation of the temple. It's a desolation of their holy place. It's intentionally done to humiliate and maim their God. And yeah, then he substitutes all the Jewish feasts with these drunken feasts of like his fake god. What is it, Bacchus? God
Yeah.
of pleasure and wine. Horrible stuff. And then he just forbids their tradition of circumcision, which is a huge deal.
Yep.
And then just continues murdering people. No one's allowed to read the Torah or any Hebrew scriptures.
This is a terrible guy. He's so bad.
Awful.
Yeah.
And it goes, I think
very
this is
satanic.
what's really interesting about him. It goes way beyond just like even being a malicious, evil, homicidal maniac to he's making active decisions to try to destroy their God and trying to usurp the Lord, which, big no-no. He does this, and it's so heinous to watch. And so if you go like verse 10 of chapter 8, yeah, this is speaking of that horn. This is this guy. It grew great even to the host of heaven. Some of the hosts and some of the stars it threw down to the ground, trampled them. It became great, even as great as the prince of the host, and the regular burnt offering was taken away from him, and the place of his sanctuary was overthrown, and a host will be given over to it together with the regular burnt offering because of transgression. It will throw truth to the ground, and it will act, and it will prosper. This is so much clearer on this side of the prophecy because we know who this guy is. It's been fulfilled. Obviously, if you're in Daniel's shoes, this probably doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, you can almost imagine as he's hearing this going, this sounds horrible, but what is this? And I kind of like to think about that, because if I put myself in Daniel's shoes and I read this and I go, okay, that's how I feel a lot about like end times prophecy now.
Yeah.
Now I can look back because I know this Antiochus Epiphanes dude, and I can see what he did, and I go, oh, there it is. It all makes sense in hindsight.
Parallels.
As things continue to progress in our own world, the very same thing's going to happen with some of these more foggy prophecies, or I don't want to say foggy, but they're vague in our mind. We don't quite understand them. Same thing's going to happen. We're going to have that understanding. Let's talk about this host or stars that were cast down.
Clearly the Jewish people, right?
Yeah. By the way, Noelle, apparently your audio feed is significantly quieter than my audio feed. I'm getting feedback from somebody. So if you want to go into the audio and see if you can fix that for a second.
I appreciate that feedback, team. Thanks.
Yes. So anyway, let me just talk about this. This is speaking of the Jewish people. We can really clearly see that in retrospect, based on what we just said about what Antiochus Epiphanes did to the Jewish people. It becomes obvious. But if you remember, God's promise to Abraham way back in Genesis chapters 15 and 22, he compares Abraham's offspring, which will be the Jewish nation, the nation of Israel, to the stars in the heavens. So it is not a stretch at all to refer to the Jewish people as that. Let us know if Noelle's audio is better.
Yeah, hopefully it's better. Sorry about that.
Okay, no problem. All right. Also, I want to read verse 11 from the NASB because I think it just makes a little bit more sense. I think it's a better translation. It says, it even exalted itself to be equal. This speaking of this Antiochus Epiphanes. The horn. It even exalted itself to be equal with the commander big C, of the army, and it removed the regular sacrifice from him. So clearly, as Noel said, this maniac thinks he is God. He goes so far as to actually slaughter a pig on the altar and then spread the guts all over the place just to be horrendous. And he is a type, Type, or foreshadowing of the coming Antichrist. Noel, explain to us what a type is in the Bible, because that's going to be a new term for a few people.
Yes. Yeah. So I kind of previewed this at the beginning. But one of the things that God does for us is that he draws parallels between human events and people to help us understand these supernatural things that will happen. And so you can very much think about it as, maybe a picture or a metaphor so that you kind of understand it as taking something that will happen and very much simplifying it. And so when we say he is a type of the coming Antichrist, what that means is that he is a picture of what that will be. He's something that we can look at and analyze and understand so that we can understand the Antichrist. It's like we need these real world examples in order to understand these really robust spiritual things that are going to happen. And I mean, obviously, one of the most clear things about this guy is that he is trying to usurp and trying to be God. He is completely controlled by Satan. He is going to actively try to annihilate the Jewish people. That's all things that this Antiochus guy does. It's all things that the Antichrist will do as well. And so it helps give us these parallels to draw. It's not perfect because they're two separate people at two separate times, but it's a really good way of also indicating that there is prophecy that has multiple terms of fulfillment. And so we're looking at this. This is the short midterm fulfillment. This also gives us an idea of what that long-term fulfillment is going to look like when the Antichrist comes. And that's kind of how you can draw those parallels between the two. Does that make sense?
That's perfect. And just for anyone who's new and you're like, okay, so when is the Antichrist coming? I need to know this. We don't know. I just thought I'd throw that out there. We don't know. We know we're closer every single day. I mean, obviously we have to be as time goes on, but as far as when, we're not sure. Let's read verses 13.
Can I just stop on the type thing for a moment though? Because there's another type that people may have heard of that's really interesting. That is a type of Christ. So this is a type of Antichrist. And so you might have heard that Adam was a type of Christ. And it's like this really weird thing to say because it's like, wait, Jesus Christ, the Messiah, the Savior, and there's these Old Testament types of that. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Paul talks about it. Mom, just because I think it's fascinating, can you tell us what on earth that's all about? She's like, no,
I can't.
I don't want
to. You do it. I'm not
now
prepared.
We're picking up slight static with Noelle's audio. I thought I could get you to talk about it so I could deal with my static. It's going poorly, team. But basically, Adam is the first man in creation. Jesus, firstborn over all creation. You can draw parallels there. Adam being this like perfect head of the family of the house. Jesus being the same thing. What's also interesting is you get these fulfillment loops. So that in the same way that Adam's decision condemned all of mankind to death, Christ brings all of mankind out of that and fulfills that loop and sort of closes it. And so you get these parallels drawn from the very beginnings of Scripture all the way then through to the end. You get that with the Antichrist, you both get that with the Christ. So it's really interesting to look into if you want to do a little side research on that. I'll now try to deal with my mic.
All right, I will read verses 13 to 14 while you
do it.
All right. It's just, it's live. We can't control it.
We have no idea.
All right. All right. It says, then I heard a holy one speaking. By the way, we think that would be an angel. We can't think of anything else. And another holy one said to that particular one who was speaking, sorry, I think that one was probably Jesus pre-incarnate, and then an angel speaks to him. I'm going to stop interjecting things. Let me start over. Okay, this is just like the worst night ever. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to that particular one who was speaking, how long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply while the offense causes horror, so that to allow both the sanctuary and the army to be trampled? And he said to me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, and then the sanctuary will be properly Restored. Okay. Well, I just about murdered all of that.
That's okay. I mean,
Okay.
it's tough. 2,300 days.
Turn it down a little bit now. You're super loud.
It's going poorly. Oh dear.
I don't know what to do. All right. So anyway, let go ahead and talk.
Yeah. Okay. 2,300 days. A little over 6 years.
There it is.
This is Hanukkah.
All right. So exactly. And honestly, we don't have anything in history recorded that tells us anything was 2,300 days. We know it was because we trust that the Bible is never wrong. It's never been wrong about anything else that we could possibly know. But it's just not been recorded for us. At least I couldn't find any record of it. Yeah. But yeah, this is the feast of Hanukkah. So we're actually told about this in John 10:22 that Jesus, it's referred to as the Feast of Dedication. Jesus actually attends a Hanukkah celebration, which I think is really cool for those of us who didn't realize that Jesus did celebrate Hanukkah. And First Maccabees 4:56, which is an apocryphal book, but has some interesting historical content, also refers to it as the Festival of Lights.
Can you just tell us what an apocryphal book is quickly?
It was just intertestamental, meaning in between the end of the Old and the beginning of the New Testaments. There was some history written and it was not inspired. We don't consider it part of our Bibles. If you have a Catholic Bible, it's probably in there, but it's not always historically or factually accurate. So for us, that just knocks it right out of the running to be in the Bible itself. But it has some things in it that are pretty interesting and valuable, and a lot of things that are true. So we don't just toss it all out and say it's not worth anything, but we
use it like it's a historical textbook more so than it's instructive scripture.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. All right. So that's what happens there. Should we go on to just a summary of verses 15 to 18, Noelle?
Yeah. Definitely go read this on your own. But Daniel just encounters the voice of God telling Gabriel to explain this vision to him, which just feels like a lot of game of telephone. And Daniel's response is to just, fall down on the ground. And vision's really frightening, but this is, I think, is more daunting than anything he just saw. Like the presence of God just basically makes him pass out. And then Gabriel helps him and explains the vision to him. It's just going so badly tonight. I'm so sorry. I thought I could hold it out. And then we move on to verses 23 to 26. Okay.
All right. Here we go. All right. And in the latter period of their dominion, when the wrongdoers have run their course, a king will arise, insolent and skilled in intrigue. Do I want to go on from there?
Oh, no.
You know
what does that mean? He's insolent and skilled in intrigue. That sounds fascinating.
Okay. So here's the deal. Remember when we said, that long-term and short-term prophecy thing. So this is like looking over the horizon past Antiochus Epiphanes to the Antichrist. Everything we're going to read here really can apply to both. So as we read these verses, I want you to, especially because the Antiochus Epiphanes, that's a long time ago. It's interesting, but it doesn't have a lot of bearing on my life outside of the fact that the Bible was true and right. But the whole Antichrist coming thing, that I'm really intrigued by. So let's take a look at this and see if we can kind of figure out what does this guy end up looking like and how do you spot him? So I want to actually just go back to verse 23 with that in mind. So it says, when wrongdoers have run their course. What does that mean? When
I guess they've just reached the limits of perversion and evil, probably.
Yeah, 2 Timothy 3:1-5 says this. This is in the New Testament much later. But understand this, that in the last days, there will come times of difficulty. For people will be, now listen to the description, lovers of self, lovers of money, proud, arrogant, abusive, disobedient to their parents, ungrateful, unholy, heartless, unappeasable, slanderous, without self-control, brutal, not loving good, treacherous, reckless, swollen with conceit, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having the appearance of godliness but denying its power. That is a description of right now. I mean, could that possibly be any more direct than what we are living through?
Here's a question though. Could we
Could we not say that that's applicable to literally any time in history, though?
Well, definitely. I mean, yeah. Roberta says sounds like today. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think so. But I think when we take a look, any of us who are watching this can say, in my lifetime, I don't care how old you are, in my lifetime, I have seen it get exponentially worse. I mean, I think, Noelle, you could even say that, and you're a whole lot younger than I am, that from the time, you were born until now, things have gone downhill.
Spiraled. Yeah. And I think that's probably the critical component of it, is that this has always been a problem, and it's an issue of human nature, and humans are just generally awful and evil and wicked. But even in the Old Testament, we see this scenario happen where God's like, you guys have run out of wickedness. Like, you're so bad, I have to just wipe this out and start all over again. Mm-hmm. And it does indicate that there is this, there's an escalation of behavior, and it gets to this point where it's so extreme and so horrific. It's just way out there. And so you can definitely watch over the course of history, things spiral out of control, and sometimes even get better for a period of time and then go downhill and then get better. But this will be at like just the tail end of that, basically days of Noah situation, where it's so bad that it's just untenable.
And the other thing is that we know that God is a very, 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 very patient God, mm-hmm. but there comes a point where he is done being patient. His patience runs out, and that is good to remember. So let's go on to verse 24, and let's read more about this Antichrist. Go ahead, Noelle.
His power will be mighty, but not by his own power. Interesting. He will destroy to an extraordinary degree and be successful and do as he pleases. He will destroy mighty men and the holy power. Not people. By his own power. The holy people. Not by his own power indicates by Satan's power, which is frightening, and also indicates that his evil doings will be successful ultimately, and he'll prevail in that and actually kill good men, holy people. It's just, really terrible.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, 25. Through his shrewdness, he will make deceit a success by his influence. He will make himself great in his own mind. He will destroy many while they are at ease. He will even oppose the prince of princes, but he will be broken without human agency. Convincing, total liar. What does while they are at ease mean here?
The Bible also talks about while people are marrying and being given in marriage and eating and drinking and kind of going about their daily life, then things all come crumbling down. And I think what this means is that he's going to be so deceitful. It's not I think sometimes we think the Antichrist will come on the scene wearing a big sign that says, "I'm the Antichrist," and everyone will be
666 plastered across his head. Yeah.
Yeah, no, he's going to be so incredibly deceitful. Remember that he barges onto the scene as a man of incredible peace. This guy is so deceitful that the Bible says at one point that if it were possible that the elect, those of us who know Jesus, could be deceived, we would. Jesus keeps that from happening. But that's how good he is. So he's not walking around with a big sign going, "I'm the Antichrist, here I've arrived on the scene." He comes on like he's a great person, and everybody will be lauding him, and he will bring peace to the earth. He's going to do all kinds of outwardly wonderful things that look really, really good. The problem is he's just setting it up for the kill. And so he's luring everybody in, and then he goes absolutely maniac, especially about 3.5 years in, where he turns on the Jewish people that have been trusting him now because he's been good to them. And it's absolutely horrendous. Absolutely horrendous. Let's read verse 26.
And the vision of the evenings and mornings, which has been told, is true. But as for you, keep the vision secret, because it pertains to many days in the future.
Okay, so really, it sounds weird, keep the vision secret, oh no, Daniel wrote it down. He wasn't supposed to do that. No, that's not what that means. It could just as easily be translated, close the vision, close the book. We're done with this part for now. I'm not going to add anything to it for now, because Daniel's probably like, what beasts am I going to see next? Like what's going to happen tomorrow? So God just basically says, no, we're done with this for now. The vision is over. Go about your business. And Daniel's response to that is, then I, Daniel, was exhausted and sick for days. Then I got up and carried on the king's business, but I was astounded at the vision, and there was no one to explain it. So it starts by Daniel just saying, it made me sick. I was beside myself. When I finally was able to get myself going again, I was astonished because there was no one to explain it. So question for all of you. So start typing. I thought the angel Gabriel just explained all of this. Daniel says there was no one to explain it. And yet we were just told that Gabriel gave him the interpretation. So what does that mean? Yeah. Maybe we can write that into the question.
Yeah. And the other question that I had was, what do you think the sickness was that Daniel experienced? I mean, that's also just odd, isn't it? So he says nobody's there to explain it. But I mean, Gabriel did explain it, and now he's sick. Like, what is this sickness that he's experiencing? And I mean, is this physical? Is this emotional? Because I mean, I love that his response is so visceral. Not because I'm happy that Daniel experienced that, but I think because that's incredibly relatable, probably, and also gives us a sense of the, I don't know how extreme it is, but it also begs these questions. Does it really mean explain or maybe justify? Interesting. That's interesting. So Emily says, when it says, I was astounded at the vision, there's no one to explain it, maybe a little bit deeper, it means there was no one to justify it or, to make sense of it in a broader picture.
I like that, Emily.
That makes sense. Yeah,
excellent.
That makes sense to me.
It's quiet out there tonight. This was a really, really hard chapter, by the way. I want you to know I spent about 5 days just trying to figure out how to, like the logistics of how to even teach this without our numbers dwindling to about 3. It's just really hard. Roberta says, sickness could be heartfelt sadness, knowing what will happen. Yeah.
He also doesn't necessarily have a good view of the timetable on this, so it's probably unclear how long-term or short-term this is when he's hearing this. And he's had enough prophecies come true very much within his lifetime that it should be concerning. Does he mean that he had no other human to discuss it with? That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
That's a good one.
Have you ever met an external processor who needs to talk about it to be able to figure out the answer? Mom, have you ever met one of those? Do you know
think
about
I'm married
those?
to one of those. Yes, I am. As an internal processor. Yeah. Yes, you and your dad, you have to process. Susie says that sickness could be like just worried. Have you ever been worried to the point that your stomach was actually upset? Because I know that's happened to me like a million times. Yes. Lori says maybe because the vision was so bad, it literally made him physically sick. Yeah. Kimberly says that doomsday feeling. Oh, I think we can all relate to that. And then Karen says, maybe he's sick with anxiety. Yeah,
I think that's likely. So. I tend towards Lori's that he was physically sick because of it. Because I think we've all felt that before, where you've just like been so stressed out or so worried about something that you were actually physically ill. It's just horrible. It's just the worst. Shirley's answer.
Probably depressed. Yeah, probably a combination of anxiety and depression, and all of that stuff affects you internally, Any of us say, no, I have no idea how that works. No, I think we all
give us a thumbs up. And I think the other thing that, I mean, even in reading this, you kind of get done with it and you're like, oh goodness, that was a big mess. Wow, that was kind of a wreck. How much more concerning and devastating and awful would it be in Daniel's shoes, having actually visually seen all of this and having actually less context and less information than we do when he's hearing this? I mean, that would just been, I think it helps me to understand just the gravity of what he's saying, and the gravity and the horror of what he saw. We have to just appreciate how incredibly candid he is, how open he is with this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Overwhelmed.
And yeah, exactly. Some said, I believe he was just overwhelmed with the vision and its interpretation to the point he was physically affected. I think that's probably the most succinct way and accurate way to put it. And like Noelle was saying, that Gabriel did interpret it. But what we said a while ago was on his side of it, looking forward, even though it was interpreted for him, it was still very, very foggy in so many ways. Now we look back at it, we have all the details, plus a lot of that already happened. So we don't have to worry about it because it's already done. The part that's still coming, Emily said earlier, this is really scary. And I know, yeah, it is. It is scary, but God is still in control and on the throne, and nothing happens outside of his purview. So even when we go through really, really hard times, and we know that hard times are coming up in the end of times, it is not without God. It will be with him in whatever way he chooses to manifest himself at that time. There's different ideas about that. One thing we know is that he will never leave us or forsake us. And so that gives us great comfort and peace and joy, knowing that he's in charge of the end as well as he was in charge of the beginning, and absolutely everything in between.
And it's still just the most insane, bizarre, crazy, interesting prophecies to read about. So lucky us for having a little bit more of a picture. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Oh, Susie's given like high five. That's right, Susie. Okay, so if you hung on with us through chapter 8, you get a certificate and a trophy and a gold medal. Because if you can do chapter 8, you can do anything. Okay. Congratulations for hanging in, and thank you for hanging with us. And I hope it wasn't just absolutely insane. Hopefully chapter 9 won't be quite as hard, but I don't know. It might be. Just so happy to have you all with us. Karen says, amen. God is in control. That's a great note to end on, Karen. Thank you for that.
Yes.
Thursday night, we have our Bible Study Hub with our Doctrine series, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. It's on the topic of Jesus, and Pastor Lee will be doing that. And Noelle, I don't know if you or I are doing it with him, but one of us will be on with him as well. So if you can hop on Thursday night, we're gonna talk about our dear, wonderful Savior Jesus, and we're even gonna hit on some things that are prevalent in our current society with some ways to get Jesus wrong. And we want to make sure we recognize those and that we don't fall into any of the traps, because some of them sound really good. Emily says, thanks for sticking with us to love the doctrine. Oh, I'm so glad. Emily has been all over the Doctrine series. We love it. All right. Well, that's enough for tonight. I'm exhausted. I think I've just exhausted every single person watching. But we appreciate you being here. Thanks for Susie. And you guys all have a great night too. Noelle, take us out.
Yeah. We'll see you next week, same place, same time. In the meantime, team, go make good decisions. We'll see you later. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.